Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So glad you could join us again. Today, we're tackling a big one, a really big one, Nostradamus. Michel Nostradamus and his prophecies.
Yeah, it's a name everyone knows, right? Immediately conjures up images of cryptic predictions, glimpses into the future. And we've really dug into the source material for you on this one. We spent some serious time with it. We've got extensive excerpts from Prophecies of Nostradamus, specifically that Z Library PDF version. So we're talking the preface, which is fascinating. A big chunk of the centuries, I through 7th, then jumping ahead to 8 through X, and the really crucial epistle to Henry II.
Right. And maybe a quick mention of the almanacs, too, although they're a bit different. But here's the thing. Our goal for you today isn't, to sit here and say, okay, this quatrain means this specific historical event.
Oh, absolutely not.
Oh.
That's a well-trodden path, and honestly, it's a rabbit hole, a deep one.
Exactly. We want to pull out what Nostradamus himself actually said. What were his stated motivations? What methods did he claim to use? What are those big recurring ideas that keep popping up in his writings?
It's about trying to understand the man and his work more from his perspective, based on the texts he left behind. Kind of a shortcut, maybe, past all the layers of interpretation and myth that have built up.
Okay, sounds good. Let's get into it then.
The seer's intent, unveiling Nostradamus' preface.
So where better to start than the very beginning, right? With the preface to his prophecies, and this isn't just some, standard book introduction. It feels really personal. He addresses it directly to his son, Caesar.
That's right. He starts, "Your late arrival, Caesar Nostradamus, my son." And immediately you get this sense of intimacy. But then he says he wants to leave this reminder after my death for the benefit of all men.
So it's both personal and public right from the outset. A legacy for his son, but intended for everyone.
Exactly. It shows this dual motivation. There's a personal drive, but also this almost a sense of duty. Like this knowledge has to be passed on.
And how does he say he got this knowledge?
Well, he's pretty clear on that. He says it was vouchsafed me to know by means of astronomy, by the divine spirit. So, right away, he's linking divine inspiration with a specific method, astronomy, or what passed for astronomy and astrology in the 16th century.
Okay, so divine insight, but processed through this celestial science.
Kind of, but there's also this strong undercurrent of anxiety, fear, maybe.
Yeah, I picked that up too. He talks about the injustice of the age and worrying his writings might be destroyed.
Right. He fears condemnation, especially from, and he names them, those in power now, monarchs, leaders of sects and religions.
He thinks they wouldn't understand or maybe couldn't handle what he saw for the future.
Precisely. He believed they'd condemn things that only later centuries will learn how to see and understand. This directly leads into why he says he wrote in a nebulous rather than plainly prophetic form. It wasn't just style. He frames it as a necessity.
A deliberate obscurity. To protect the work or protect himself?
Both, I think. He was living in a time when saying the wrong thing, especially anything that sounded like heresy or challenged authority, could be incredibly dangerous. Lethal, even.
And it uses that quote, doesn't he? The one about pearls?
Oh yeah, the biblical quote. "Do not give anything holy to the dogs, nor throw pearls in front of swine, lest they trample them with their feet and turn on you and tear you apart."
Wow. That's intense. It paints such a vivid picture of him guarding these insights.
It really does. And it brings up that central question. Was the vagueness purely a shield? A conscious strategy?
Or was it just the nature of the visions themselves? Maybe they came to him in fragments, symbols, needing that kind of nebulous language.
That's the puzzle, isn't it? It could easily be both. A pragmatic choice driven by fear, but also maybe the only way he could articulate these fleeting symbolic visions he claimed to have.
Which leads to how he described himself. He didn't actually like the word prophet, did he?
No, he explicitly says he eschewed the word prophet. He preferred seer.
What was the difference for him?
He defines a prophet, interestingly, as one who sees distant things through a natural knowledge of all creatures, implying maybe a more direct line to the divine, whereas a seer, by implication, uses certain faculties or methods like his astronomy calculations to access that knowledge.
So it's a subtle distinction, but important. He's claiming a special ability, maybe divinely helped, but grounding it in a method.
Exactly. It positions him carefully, not just a divine mouthpiece, which could be dangerous, but someone with a specific, perhaps learned faculty. It maintains his agency.
Okay, so let's dig into those methods a bit more. He keeps coming back to the divine, right?
Absolutely. Phrases like divine power and inspiration and divine will alone are all over the preface. It's foundational. He truly believed this was coming from a higher source.
But then there's the other side, the calculations.
Yes, the astronomical assurances and continual calculations. He mentions using official astrology, which was a serious, complex field back then, seen as a way to understand celestial influences.
But he draws a line at magic, doesn't he?
A very clear line. He warns against execrable magic. He saw his work as divinely guided and scientifically calculated, not sorcery.
And there's that story about burning books.
Oh, that's fascinating, isn't it? He says he found these ancient books hidden for centuries that dealt with occult labors, like transmutation alchemy, turning metals into gold or silver.
And he burned them. Why?
To prevent others from being tempted by it. He describes this intense light, like a flashing cataclysm, when they burned. He reduced them to ashes so no one else could pursue what he saw as potentially dangerous, forbidden knowledge.
So he's almost policing the boundaries of acceptable, mystical, or hidden knowledge himself.
Seems like it. It paints a picture of someone deeply engaged with these ideas, but also wary of their potential misuse.
And he talks about his own experiences too, like trances.
Yeah, he mentions being surprised sometimes by day while in a trance, and his habit of agreeable nocturnal studies.
It sounds like an incredibly intense, dedicated life, not just casual fortune-telling, more like total immersion.
Definitely. It suggests long hours, deep focus, and maybe altered states of consciousness, playing a role in how he received these insights.
And the sheer scope of what he claimed to see is just mind-boggling.
It really is. He states the time frame runs from today to the year 3797.
3797, that's over 2,000 years into the future from his time.
An astonishingly long view. He wasn't just looking at the next decade. He was mapping out millennia, a grand narrative of history.
And a lot of that narrative seems pretty grim. He talks about huge catastrophes.
Oh, yes. A worldwide conflagration, lands covered by water, abundance of fire and fiery missiles, even a holocaust preceding a last conflagration.
Fiery missiles. That sounds chillingly modern, even if he meant something else. The scale is immense. Global destruction.
It is. But then, mixed in with the doom, there's this prediction of a return of monarchy and eventually a golden age.
Right, the golden age, linked to celestial signs. So a cycle. Destruction followed by renewal.
That seems to be the implication. A cyclical view of history, perhaps? But the renewal comes after immense suffering.
Like the population decline he mentions.
Exactly.
Oh.
He sees humanity being severely diminished, so much so that fields lie empty because there's scarcely anyone who wishes to take over them. They become free where they had previously been tied.
A really stark image of desolation, aftermath.
Very powerful. And then, crucially, for anyone trying to read this like a history book written in advance,
He throws a spanner in the work.
he absolutely does. He admits the prophecies are not in a chronological sequence.
Not chronological. So you can't just read Century of Immerse and expect it to happen before Century 2.
Nope. He says he limited the places, times, and dates so that future generations will see how I've listed others in clearer language. He implies the clarity will emerge later.
When the time comes for the removal of ignorance, he says.
Right, so the ambiguity isn't a bug, it's a feature by design.
Yeah.
To prevent misinterpretation now and allow for understanding later. That's his claim, anyway.
The royal correspondence insights from the epistle to Henry II.
Okay, let's move on to the epistle to Henry II. This is different from the preface, isn't it? It's a direct address to the King of France.
Yes, a formal dedication of the last 3 centuries of his prophecies to King Henry II.
Which is a big deal in itself. Dedicating potentially controversial work to the reigning monarch.
Huge deal. He admits he was long in doubt about who to dedicate them to. Choosing Henry suggests he was seeking, maybe, legitimacy, protection, patronage.
Or maybe just warning the king, given the content.
Possibly all of the above. He praises Henry's royal splendor and incomparable humanity, so there's definitely some flattery there, perhaps, to cushion the blow of the prophecies themselves.
And does he talk more about his methods here?
He does. He reiterates the nocturnal and prophetic calculations, but he adds this interesting phrase. He says they come from natural instinct accompanied by a poetic furor.
Poetic furor. I like that. It suggests something less mechanical than just calculations, more inspired, intense.
Like a creative frenzy almost, channeling these visions. But he immediately balances it again, saying they are integrated with astronomical calculations.
Covering all bases.
And he emphasizes the scope again. Calculations corresponding to years, months, and weeks of the regions, countries, and most of the towns and cities of all Europe, including Africa and part of Asia. Global reach tied to his version of science.
Okay. And what about the obscurity? Does he mention that again to the king?
He does, and this is where it gets really interesting, maybe even a bit contradictory.
How so?
He acknowledges the difficulty, saying, the rhythm is as easy as the sense is difficult. People can read the quatrains, but understanding them is hard.
Okay, that fits with the preface.
But then he tells the king, the danger of the times requires that such secrets should not be bared except in enigmatic sentences having, however, only one sense and meaning, and nothing ambiguous or amphibological inserted.
Wait, only one sense and meaning. But they're enigmatic. How can they be obscure and have only one clear meaning without ambiguity?
Exactly. That's the contradiction, or at least the tension. In the preface, the ambiguity seemed like the whole point, a necessary fog. Here, he tells the king the fog contains a single precise meaning.
So what's going on? Is he just trying to reassure the king that it's not all random nonsense, that there's a definite message, even if it's hidden?
That's one possibility. Or maybe he genuinely believed the obscurity was the necessary path to that single meaning, that the meaning would only become clear when the events happen or to those with the right insight at the right time.
Like the meaning is locked, and the obscurity is the key, but only time or wisdom can turn it.
Something like that. He's walking a very fine line. He wants the king to take it seriously, to see a divine, singular truth, but he still needs the protective layer of obscurity for everyone else, and maybe for himself.
It's quite the balancing act. Does he give the king any kind of timeline in the epistle?
He does provide a kind of framework. He lays out a detailed biblical chronology from Adam to Christ, which sort of anchors his sense of historical time.
Standard practice for the era, probably.
Yes, but then he states his own prophecies extend to the beginning of the 7th millenary. He's thinking in 1,000-year chunks, placing his work within this vast sweep of cosmic history, potentially right up to the end of time.
Again, that incredible scale. And what specific themes does he highlight for the king? Anything different from the preface?
He focuses heavily on religious persecution. He predicts intense suffering for the Christian church, especially in Africa, and gives a surprisingly specific end date, 1792.
1792, that's very precise for him. Why that year? Who knows?
Who knows? The imagery is brutal. Human blood will flow in the public streets and temples like water after an impetuous rain. Just horrific violence against the church.
And the Antichrist figure comes up again.
Yes, the second Antichrist. He says this figure will work through 3 temporal kings who are swayed by tongues which will cut more than any sword.
Tongues cutting more than swords. That sounds like propaganda, manipulation, doesn't it? The power of words to cause destruction.
It really does. Eerily modern in a way. And he adds this very vivid, almost demonic imagery. Satan, loosed from the prisons of hell to give birth to the great Dog and Dogum, causing an abominable breach in the churches.
Dog and Dogum. Strange names.
Yeah.
Very apocalyptic language.
Deeply apocalyptic. But then, just like in the preface, after all this darkness...
There's a glimmer of hope.
Yes. He foresees universal peace established among men. This happens when Satan will remain down for around 1,000 years.
So a millennium of peace after the tribulations. And the golden age comes back.
He mentions it again, yes. A renewed reign of Saturn, which is code for that utopian golden age. So the cycle. Chaos, destruction, binding of evil, then peace and restoration.
It provides the kind of ultimate resolution, I suppose. Anything else notable in the epistle?
Well, there's his nod to humility or maybe pragmatism. He says he's willing to be corrected by the most learned judgment and insists his writings aren't contrary to the true Catholic faith.
Covering his bases again, making sure the church doesn't come after him.
Very likely. It shows him navigating the dangerous waters of prophecy in a highly religious age. He needed to convey his visions without being branded a heretic. It's a careful performance.
Glimpses into the quatrain's themes and striking images from the centuries.
Okay, so we have his intentions from the preface, his methods and reassurances from the epistle. Now for the main event, really. The centuries themselves, the quatrains.
The heart of it all. And as we've said, they're dense, symbolic, geographically specific sometimes, but chronologically jumbled. So interpreting them directly is tricky.
Understatement of the century. So not decoding. We're looking for themes, recurring images, the flavor of the prophecy.
Exactly. And right at the start, in Century Search, he gives us a glimpse into his process, almost setting the scene. Quatrain 1. Sitting alone at night in secret study, it is placed on the brass tripod. A slight flame comes out of the emptiness.
The tripod, the flame, very atmospheric. It sounds like a ritual.
It does. And Quatrain 2 continues. The wand in the hand, with water he sprinkles. A voice, fear. He trembles in his robes. Divine splendor, the god sits nearby.
Wow. He's taking a picture of himself in a trance-like state, communing with something divine, even feeling fear. He wants us to see how he sees.
Yes, grounding the visions in a physical sensory experience. And then he weaves in the astronomy, like in Centuries Quatrain 16, a size joined with a pond in Sagittarius.
Say the Saturn, right. Pond may be Aquarius, so specific astrological configurations.
Precisely. Connecting the mystical visions to his claimed scientific method, the astronomical assurances. These configurations are the markers, the triggers.
Okay, let's look at some major themes. Conflict and upheaval seem huge. Political revolutions.
Definitely. Century 7, Quatrain 3 is often cited. When the litters are overturned, the new republic will be troubled. The Reds and the Whites will rule wrongly.
Reds and Whites. Sounds like the French Revolution, Jacobins and Royalists.
It's a very common interpretation. Whether he saw it or just captured a universal pattern of revolution, it resonates. Or Century 7, Quatrain 4, a king who will have little peace and a short life. At this time, the ship of the papacy will be lost. Suggests turmoil for both state and church.
And that rather blunt one about a female ruler.
Ah yes, Century the 3rd, Quatrain 28. For a long time, a young female to reign, never has one so bad come upon the kingdom. Pretty harsh. People have tried to pin that on various queens, but it remains typically ambiguous.
And lots about war and invasion, I imagine.
Constantly. Century Circe, Quatrain 18, blames French discord and negligence for allowing Mohammedans an opening, leading to bloodshed in Siena and Marseille, being filled with ships.
So, internal weakness leads to external threat. A timeless theme. He was worried about the Ottomans, clearly.
Very much so. And then there's maybe the most famous one, Century 1st, Quatrain 35. The young lion will overcome the older one.
In a field of combat in single fight, he will pierce his eyes in their golden cage, 2 wounds in one, then he dies a cruel death. The Henry II jousting accident prediction.
It's uncannily specific after the event. The younger Montgomery, with a lion on his shield, accidentally killing Henry II, the older lion, by piercing his eye through his gilded helmet. 2 wounds in one could be the eye and brain. It's the kind of quatrain that cemented his legend.
Chillingly accurate if you accept the interpretation. It shows how potent that mix of specificity and vagueness could be.
Exactly. He also talks about conflict further east. Century 3rd, Quatrain 60 mentions great prescription throughout Asia Minor, bloodshed linked to a young black one filled with felony. Religious, ethnic conflict. Hard to say.
And Century 3rd, Quatrain 74 talks about someone of Trojan blood with a Germanic heart rising to power, driving out foreign Arabic people and restoring the church.
Yes, suggesting a major figure reshaping Europe, possibly with mixed heritage. Trojan blood often linked to Frank's French, pushing back external influence and reasserting Christian dominance.
Yep.
Again, reflecting anxieties of his time.
It wasn't all human conflict, though, right? He saw natural disasters, too.
Oh, yes, big ones. Century 3rd, Quatrain 17. For 40 years the rainbow will not be seen. For 40 years it will be seen every day. Then drought, then great floods.
40 years is biblical, but it suggests long-term climate shifts, extreme weather patterns, very resonant today.
It is. And more sudden events, like Century Quatrain, Quatrain 46, near Auch in France, a great fire will fall from the sky for 3 nights. Shortly afterwards, there will be an earthquake.
Fire from the sky, meteor, comet impact, followed by an earthquake, cosmic and terrestrial disasters linked.
And famine. That theme is brutal. Century 1st, Quatrain 67, a great famine, worldwide, so vast people will grab roots from the trees and children from the breast.
Horrifying. Just absolute desperation.
And it gets even worse. Century 2, Quatrain 75. So high will the bushel of wheat rise, that man will be eating his fellow man.
Cannibalism due to starvation. He doesn't shy away from the absolute depths of human suffering.
Not at all. His visions encompass the worst possibilities.
One thing that strikes me is how often he names real places. Lyons, Paris, Rome, Naples, London.
All over the place. It grounds the prophecies, makes them feel tangible. Even if the events and people are vague, it gives them an air of geographical reality.
But alongside the European places, there's that constant focus on the East, Arabs, Mohammedans, Persia, Africa.
Yes, reflecting the geopolitical landscape of the 16th century. The Ottoman Empire was the major external power, the other often seen as a threat to Christendom. His worldview is very much shaped by that dynamic.
And the church itself is often central to the conflicts or changes he foresees.
Absolutely central. Century 3rd, Quatrain 53, links a change in Christianity's laws to the discovery of a new source of gold and silver.
The New World discoveries impacting religion. Plausible.
And Century III, Quatrain 73, describes the church being persecuted, temples plundered, and a really strange alliance. Arabs will be allied with the Poles. Highly specific, very dramatic.
Arabs and Poles, that is unexpected. And Century VIII, Quatrain 78.
That one mentions a soldier of fortune with twisted tongue, entering the sanctuary of the gods, opening the door to heretics, and raising up a church militant.
A charismatic, maybe deceptive figure shaking up religion, leading to a more aggressive faith.
Could be interpreted that way. It fits the pattern of upheaval and transformation within the religious sphere that runs throughout his work.
So looking at the centuries overall, that intentional obscurity we talked about is really key, isn't it?
It's everything. It allows for endless reinterpretation. It prevents the prophecies from being easily debunked by failed predictions. It keeps them alive, letting each era find echoes of its own anxieties within them. That ambiguity is the secret to their longevity.
Connecting the dots, the enduring legacy and applicability.
Okay, so we've walked through the preface, the epistle, dipped into the centuries. We've seen his claimed methods, his motivations, these recurring themes of war, plague, famine, religious strife, the cycle of destruction and renewal. We decided up front not to get lost in trying to match quatrains to specific headlines. So what's the real takeaway for you listening to this deep dive?
Well, I think it's less about what he predicted specifically and more about why his work still fascinates us so much.
Right.
His writings tap into these really deep, timeless human anxieties, don't they? Fear of the unknown, fear of catastrophe, religious conflict, societal collapse. These things haven't gone away.
True. And in chaotic times, maybe people crave a sense of order, or at least a glimpse of what's coming, even a cryptic glimpse.
Exactly. There's this enduring human desire for prophecy, for foreknowledge. In our age of information overload, maybe the idea of ancient wisdom offering a shortcut, a hidden pattern, is even more appealing. Nostradamus provides this framework, however ambiguous, for trying to make sense of it all.
So for you listening, the value isn't really in becoming a Nostradamus decoder.
No, not at all. It's more about understanding his world, the 16th century mindset that produced this work. Understanding his methods, that mix of what he saw as science, astronomy, astrology, and divine inspiration.
And seeing how those core human concerns about power, survival, faith, disaster echo through history. His work becomes a kind of mirror, reflecting the fears and hopes of each generation that reads it.
Yeah, it's a mirror, and that requires critical thinking, obviously. We shouldn't read him as a literal guide to the 21st century.
Right. It's a historical document, a window into apocalyptic thought from centuries ago.
But it also tells us something about the enduring human need to find meaning, to anticipate the future, especially when things feel uncertain or dangerous. That blend of the spiritual and the proto-scientific he used was his way of grappling with the unknown.
So to sum up this deep dive, we explored Nostradamus' own account, his intentions, his methods blending the divine and the astronomical, his deliberate use of obscurity. We saw the huge themes dominating his work: war, disaster, religious upheaval, political change playing out over millennia. We touched on how his almanacs offered more specific yearly predictions, using similar veiled language but for a shorter time frame.
A vast, complex, and deliberately enigmatic body of work.
Which brings us to a final thought. Nostradamus wrote that his prophecies would become clearer when the time comes for the removal of ignorance. So here we are in what we call the information age, with more access to knowledge than ever before in human history. Are we closer to removing that ignorance he spoke of?
Or does the very nature of his prophecies, their infinite adaptability and ambiguity, mean that the ignorance can't be removed in that way? Does their power lie precisely in the fact that they remain a shadowy mirror, ensuring their timelessness by constantly inviting new interpretations, rather than offering final answers?
Something to think about. Is the mystery the point?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Nostradamus. We hope it gave you some insight into the man behind the legends, and maybe sparked some thoughts about how we all grapple with the future.
Yeah, food for thought. Until next time on The Deep Dive.